Hi guys, this is Ben here, the host of Frasier on Film. I just wanted to jump in quickly to wish you all a very happy new year. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas and to say thank you for all the support, the follows, the likes, the words of encouragement from listeners and fellow podcasters alike for the podcast. It really does mean the world because I'm just starting out. I've pre-recorded a whole bunch of these episodes, so I've already got like 7 or 8 of these in the can before I'd even released the first one. But I thought it was important for me to just say thanks. I appreciate you. Really glad that you seem to be enjoying it, or at least are telling me you're enjoying it, unless you're lying, in which case keep lying because I like to hear it. Get on with the episode, Ben, is what you're saying. But hey, guys, cheers. I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. Hope you stick around and hope you enjoy more of these episodes. Thanks. Welcome to Frasier on Film, the Frasier TV show podcast with a twist. Each episode of the podcast visits each episode of Frasier across its 11-series run. But our main focus isn't on the good doctor himself. No. It's going to be one of the guest appearances on the show that week. That could be one of the many A-listers who called into Frasier's KACL radio show, or just someone who made a fleeting appearance at Cafe Nervosa. We'll delve into that actor's backstory, look over their cinematic offerings, and deep dive into one movie specifically. By the end, we'll see if we can make a connection between their character in Frasier and their character in the film we've just talked about. So you'll be hearing about icons and wash-ups, legends and starlets, sherry drinkers and beer guzzlers, blockbusters and B-movies. It's going to be an education in it all. But what if you don't really watch Frasier? That's fine, you'll probably know the actors we're talking about. And if you don't really know the actors we're talking about, then that's fine too. You'll know the movies. So whether you're a fan of Frasier or you're a fan of film, this is the podcast for you. So, pull up your favourite bar stool at McGinty's and tell the wine club you'll be running late, because this is Frasier on Film, and I'm your host, Ben Murray, and you're listening. What if Frasier Crane met Aunt Zora years before she was Aunt Zora and was simply Pam? Welcome back, folks. Yes, here we are, Season 1, Episode 3 of Frasier on Film and Frasier itself. Today's episode of Frasier is entitled Dinner at 8. Our guest actor for the week is Patti LuPone. Who is that, I hear you cry? Or perhaps, unlike me, you knew who she was before you clicked on this episode, and this is just me being an ignorant Brit who has never heard of her. I expect that she has something to do with music rather than acting, but we'll soon find out when we get to that part. We will get to it. But this is the game changer for this podcast. We've had 2 big names, Linda Hamilton, Christopher Reeve, and now we have someone perhaps less known. I think it's fair to say, even if you know who LuPone is, she's less known than the previous 2. So let's see if we can thrive as a podcast by making an unknown interesting. Now that's the idea anyway. Oh, and our film for this week is Beau Is Afraid. 2023's Beau Is Afraid. You know, that Ari Aster one with Joaquin Phoenix. But we'll get to that steady as she goes. Before that, let's recap this week's episode of Frasier.
Hi, can I get you guys something from the bar?
Oh, dear God, yes.
I'll have a Stole Gibson on the rocks with 3 pearl onions.
If you bring him 2, if you bring him 4, he'll send it back.
And for you?
The same.
I'll have a Valentine.
Season 1, Episode 3. Episode title, Dinner at 8. Original air date, 30th of September, 1993. Writer, Anne Fleet and Chuck Ramberg, and director, James Burrows, our old friend Jim Burrows. The show actually opens up with LuPone's call to the show. LuPone, as Pam, calls into the show with a conundrum, but we'll get to that. We'll come back to that at the end. Martin's bought a new suit, a sharkskin suit at that, and Daphne is fluffing Frasier's knickers in the apartment, and Frasier's about to object. A man's knickers are, but he loves how soft they are. He gets carried away with how soft they are. Niles rings to say he'll be popping by and arrives seconds later, and so Niles meets Daphne, the love of his life for who he's about to spend the next 7 years pining for. He meets her for the first time. The affection is instantaneous. His obsession, his connection, instantaneous. On his part, at least. As Martin comes out in his suit, there's a softness to him that we haven't really seen in the last 2 episodes. He's smiling and twirling around in his suit. He's settling in. It's nice to see it. It's nice to see them settling in at home. But Niles and Frasier, meanwhile, are discussing how they take after their mother much more. They speak about taking him out for an evening of fine dining at Le Cigare Volant, their favourite restaurant, which you'll be hearing about many, many times over the course of this podcast. So they're talking about fine dining at Le Cigare Volant. Martin walks in. Niles, can I get you a beer? Some pork rinds. We see the clash. We cut back to the station briefly where Roz is talking about one of her dates that blew out. This is the first time that we really hear about Roz's sex life. Well, we heard her talking to her mum on the phone, but this is the first time Roz talks to Frasier about it. There's a trend setting in for Roz here. Niles comes back over to Frasier's apartment, brings Daphne some Devonshire clotted cream. Frasier side-eyes him. What are you doing, he asks. He's clocked him. He's worked out that he's got some sort of thing for Daphne. But Niles reminds him, I'm a happily married man, for God's sake. Don't worry about me. We should be worried about you, Niles. We'll be keeping our eye on you, don't you worry, boy. Anyway, Le Cigare Volant blows out. Their fine dining reservation gone like dust in the wind. So Martin suggests they go to his favourite restaurant, the Timber Mill, where you can get a steak this thick for $8.95 and 5 different toppings for your baked potato. The Timber Mill looks very much like Twin Peaks. Wooden panels, clientele, the whole aesthetic. This could be Twin Peaks. Frasier and Niles arrive and they get their ties cut in half because they've dressed far too stuffily for the restaurant. There's a culture clash at the table as the boys and Martin decide what they're going to eat, what they're going to drink. The steaks are brought out on a food cart. Niles and Frasier's face is an absolute delight. Frasier's like, can I see the other side of that one? And how much extra would it be to get one from the refrigerator? I love him. I love this stuffiness. If you're not on board with Frasier by now, you may as well drop out of Frasier, because this is why you love the man and why you love the show as far as I'm concerned. After Frasier and Niles continue to insult the restaurant, really, Martin has enough. He throws his napkin down, stands up and say,
all right, that's it. I had enough of you two jackasses. I spent the whole night listening to you making cracks about the food and the help. Well, I got news for you. People like this place. I like this place. I mean, when you insult this restaurant, you insult me. You know, I used to think you two took after your mother, liking the ballet and all that. But your mother liked a good ball game, too. She even had a hot dog once in a while. She may have had fancy taste, but she had too much class to ever make me or anybody else feel second-rate. She saw the way you two behaved tonight, she'd be ashamed. I know I am.
And Niles and Frasier are left embarrassed and forced to finish their meal in honour of their father. And they realise they may have simply lost the ability to appreciate the simple things. A fine, fine episode. Here's some trivia. Kelsey Grammer once stated that this was his favourite episode of the series. I suspect he said this early on in the making of Frasier, though, because I've heard that there are countless others that he thinks are his favourite. But I could imagine after the first season him saying this quite legitimately. This is the first episode where Maris was meant to turn up for something and she doesn't. This began a long-running joke about us never seeing Maris on screen. This off-screen presence of Maris would last the entire run of the show, exactly like Norm's wife in Cheers. This episode also has the first instance of the oft-repeated line, Sherry Niles. I always wanted to get that on a t-shirt. And that's kind of it for this episode of Frasier. So let's go straight in to the focus for the episode. The one you've all come here for, to learn about, or to tell me how little I've learnt about her if you already knew her. Patti LuPone. Here she is, calling into Frasier's show as Pam.
Hi, it's my in-laws. It's just that, well, they drop over all the time without calling first, and they expect us to stop what we're doing and entertain them.
Well, they're your husband's parents. What does he suggest?
The other day, he had us drop to the floor and stay quiet until they drove away.
A creative approach, but hardly a long-term solution.
Well, I thought about saying something, but I'm afraid I'll hurt their feelings.
Well, then you have a choice. Either you risk hurting their feelings, or you spend the rest of your life diving for cover whenever they happen to drop on by.
Shh. They're here.
Your in-laws?
Shh. Yes.
Well, then why don't you just take this opportunity to... Oh, for Pete's sake! Why don't you just tell them how you feel?
Okay, I will. Next time, I promise. Thanks, Dr. Crane.
There we go. Now, considering that the only thing I know about Patti LuPone, and that I only just discovered, is that she would reappear in season 5 of Frasier as the fiery Aunt Zora, Those who know Frasier know who Aunt Zora is. That's quite exciting. So let's go and find out a bit more about her, shall we? Patti LuPone was born April 21st, 1949 in New York. Her parents worked in education, a librarian and a school administrator. She's of Italian heritage, with her father's side coming from South Italy and her mother's side coming from Sicily. In fact, her great-great-aunt was a 19th century Italian opera singer by the name of Adelina Patti. LuPone was raised Roman Catholic. As with Christopher Reeve in last week's episode, she graduated from Juilliard's Drama Division 2 in 1972 in the same class as actor Kevin Kline. A self-described actor who sings, she became known early in her career for her mezzo-soprano vocal range and her strong Broadway voice. There you go, I knew she was going to be about singing. Following her graduation, it only took a year before she would make her Broadway debut in the play The Three Sisters in 1973. 2 short years later, she earned her first Tony Award nomination, and for those of you who don't know, a Tony Award is like the Academy Awards for the theatre. By this time, she was known for her musical comedy appearances on stage, so it was a surprise to many when she began appearing in David Mamet-penned plays. Mamet is actually the director of one of my favourite films, Glengarry Glen Ross, and those who know will be aware that his dialogue is like machine gun delivery. And LuPone impressed critics with her ability to switch it up on stage. In 1979, she was cast as Eva Peron in the original Broadway production of Evita, an experience she called the worst of her career. She said, "I was screaming my way through a part that could only have been written by a man who hates women, and I had no support from the producers, who wanted a star performance on stage but treated me as an unknown backstage. It was like Beirut, and I fought like a banshee." She's talking about Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber there, by the way. Despite her troubles, it would be this performance that secured her first Tony Award win for Best Actress in a Musical. Throughout the 80s and the 90s, LuPone worked multiple shows in London's West End, from Les Mis through to Sunset Boulevard. In fact, her stint on Sunset Boulevard saw her reunite with Andrew Lloyd Webber, the very man she'd claimed meant working on Evita was so tough. Hardly surprising then that she had an equally difficult experience and was fired from the role by Lloyd Webber before it transferred back to the United States and Glenn Close would be recast in the role. In subsequent decades, LuPone became a force to be reckoned with on stage, starring in countless shows and musicals across America. There are far, far too many to mention. Trust me, I looked at them all, I researched them all. There are countless. So just imagine there's a montage sequence now in a film showing a star travelling and performing in cities across America with many, many friends like Mandy Patinkin and Stephen Sondheim, and I guess you'd be close to working out what a big deal she clearly was.
You have to have skill, discipline, experience to walk across a stage. And if you have skill, experience, and discipline, audiences see that, and they immediately relax. And once they relax, because they don't have to worry about you can tell the story. And that's all it is. It's all just going on stage going, I got this, relax. Now come on, wait till you hear this story. Do you know what I mean? That's all it is. It's walking on stage without audiences smelling your fear, really.
Well, is that confidence? Isn't that what that is?
It's experience,
Yep.
it's skill, and it's discipline. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of sacrifice. It takes a lot of hard work to command an audience. And they expect that. And they deserve that. They're already paying so much money for the tickets.
So all this is well and good, but what about her film work? This is Frasier on film, after all. Well, it's not quite clear to me what her rationale was for entering the world of film and television, but it is clear that her stage success made the path into it much easier. There are no real grand stories on record about key cinematic achievements and interactions in the film world that she had, but her first key performance on screen appeared to take place in the mid-80s. This is a point in her life where she'd returned from London to America, and she starred in several films that were quite big: Witness with Harrison Ford and Driving Miss Daisy. She also secured a 4-year run on a television show called Life Goes On, where she played a mother of a child with Down syndrome. She went on to star in films for the next few decades, some that I've seen, such as Summer of Sam and State and Maine, but ironically, in order to secure an Emmy nomination, she would have to return to our world, the world of Frasier. As mentioned before, in season 5, she plays his fiery Greek aunt, Aunt Zora, and anyone who has seen the episode will know her grand dame performance is worthy of the Emmy nomination she received. She's since starred in many other TV shows, including Oz, 30 Rock, American Horror Story, and more recently Penny Dreadful, and even more recently Agatha All Along. Her most recent praise and plaudits, though, came for her role in Beau Is Afraid. Fitting then that we'll move on to discuss that shortly, huh? So what have I learned? I was right. She's clearly an icon of the stage and a musical powerhouse for going on 50 years now. I have to confess, I hadn't heard her sing before this, and I've listened to some videos since, and she really does have a very forceful voice, very impactful. If you're into such things, I can only imagine the power of seeing her live, and her reputation and all the plaudits are obviously well deserved. It's going to be very interesting to me to see how she pitches her performance in Beau Is Afraid, given that I have Aunt Zora as a reference point, very over the top, very fiery, and a huge bombastic voice on stage as a reference point. I can't really imagine she's going to play this quietly, but we'll see. She is apparently quite a divisive figure, though. That's something I've surmised, and from some interviews and a few video clips I've seen, she has quite strong views on things, particularly around how theatre should be appreciated. So much so that it's gotten her into a bit of trouble at times. This is a woman who has had a decades-long feud with Andrew Lloyd Webber, remember? So she's not prepared to take any shit, and fair play. But she's supposedly grabbed mobile phones from audience members mid-performance. She's called out audience members for breaking COVID protocols. I actually saw that video just last night. She was furious.
Put your mask over your nose. That's why you're in the theater. That is the rule. If you don't want to follow the rule, get the f*** out. Serious. What do you think you are if you do not respect the people that are sitting around you? Salary. You pay my salary. Bullshit. Chris Harper pays my salary. Excuse me. Who do you think you are? Just put your mask over your nose.
She clearly just pulls no punches when she thinks someone deserves to be called out, clearly. But I wonder how much of that is a certain elitist mentality, or how much of that is the strength of her convictions. She loves her art form. She believes it should be appreciated one way. Either way, let's join Patti in the first ever film I'll have seen her in. Well, no, I've seen her in Summer of Sam, as I said, and State of Maine, but I can't remember her in them at all. Let's watch this with her in the forefront of our mind and see what we can surmise given all we've learned. 2023's Beau Is Afraid, directed by Ari Aster and starring Patti LuPone, Joaquin Phoenix, Amy Ryan, and Nathan Lane.
I am so sorry for what your daddy passed down to you. But I wanted a child, the greatest gift of my life.
I'm visiting my mother tomorrow.
Hi, Carrot. It's Mom. I'm just calling to say that I'm so excited to see you tomorrow. You're my angel, and I love you. Okay, I love you. Okay, bye, sweetie. I love you.
Are you at the airport?
I'm on my way. It's not safe, is it? What do you think I should do?
I'm sure you'll do the right thing, sweetheart.
Let me begin by saying, in the process of recording this episode, I made the discovery that I have COVID. So my voice is gradually deteriorating as this goes on. I am aware. What's not deteriorating is Ari Aster's skill for filmmaking, because Beau Is Afraid, in all its 3 hours glory, is one huge, big, stonking odyssey adventure film beyond anything I could imagine. Joaquin Phoenix is absolutely anxiety-ridden in this film. He is having a terrible, terrible time. Guilt plagues him. Anxiety, worries, fears plague him over 3 hours. This is the archetypal Jewish film. those neuroses, concerns, anxieties that we see from so many great Jewish characters, from the ones Woody Allen's portrayed through to the ones that George Costanza embodies in Seinfeld. They are all here and manifest in Joaquin Phoenix's Beau. To summarize the story would do it a great disservice because it's sweeping, it's swinging, it's absolutely all over the place. It goes through significant tonal shifts. I would say there's probably about 4 significant sections in the film. The first sort of takes place in a very claustrophobic, over-the-top, exaggerated version of city living, and all the worries and concerns that come with that turned up to absolute 11. It's very, very funny the way it's portrayed, but it's also deeply disturbing and quite graphic and violent at times. Very intense, but very, very funny. And I think, crucially, your mileage will vary based on if you get on board with the humour. If you enjoy the humour of this film, you're going to love the whole ride. If you don't gel with the humour within about 15 minutes, you're going to have a bad time. You are going to have a bad time. But anyway, first act is set in a city. Second act sort of takes place in a sort of suburban household. Third act takes place in a kind of magical forest. And fourth act takes place at his childhood home, which is more of a gothic mansion of sorts, just in modern day sensibilities. All along the way, we have some of the most unique and vibrant visuals, animations of what's going on inside Beau's mind. You've got to quickly realise that trying to make sense of everything you're seeing from a rational point of view is not going to bear fruit when you're watching this film, because so much of it is symbolic and metaphorical. I can imagine many of you slapping your heads, groaning at the thought of that. Oh, really? But it absolutely works, because what you're dealing with is the psychosis of a man who has, rightly or wrongly, fallen victim to the upbringing his mother gave him. So his dad died, apparently, the moment he was conceived, so he never met his father. He was raised by his mother, Patti LuPone. We'll come to her character in a little bit of detail shortly. Raised by his mother, and as such has got this quite dark and disturbing way of viewing life, and everything that is happening to him is absolutely terrifying at all points. This is a great source of humour, but it's also very dark, very, very dark and troubling at times. For example, he gets, this is funny, but it's actually quite concerning. In his apartment building, an unknown neighbour keeps slipping a piece of paper under his door saying, "Please, can you keep the music down? It's late." Well, Beau is lying in bed silently, so he ignores it. About 2 hours later, another sheet of paper is slipped under. "Please, people are trying to sleep. Keep it down. These are precious sleeping hours." And that kind of thing tickled me, because it's like, it's an anxiety of, oh, I'm not actually doing anything wrong though. I'm not doing anything wrong, but this person thinks I am. So what's happening? What should I do? How should I approach this? I very much enjoyed it. We get some great appearances from Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan midway through the film. Nathan Lane particularly is on fire. He's having a ball. But all the way through, very strange, peculiar scenarios are happening, and you can view it and see it all as part of this great journey, this great odyssey that he's going on. It's not a spoiler to say, because it's set up quite early in the film, that Beau's mother dies. A chandelier falls and crushes her head. It doesn't crush her head, actually. It completely obliterates it. So she no longer has a head. And Bill Hader's UPS guy is the man who answers Beau's mother's phone to tell Beau the bad news. So Beau's odyssey is about getting home to see his mother, who he was originally meant to be flying home to see, but his keys were stolen from the door and his suitcase was stolen, and he couldn't afford a ticket because his card kept getting declined, and his mother was awful to him when he tried to explain that. But as you go through this film, there are scenes and there are scenarios that are going to challenge you. I have to admit, once it hits the forest, it started to lose me a little bit, but then very quickly it won me back around. There is a play, an immersive play, and we see Beau become the central character in the play for about 10 minutes, and it's absolutely incredible. The whole thing is exploring grief. It's exploring grief and anxiety and guilt in such an incredible way, and it is quite uniquely Jewish, but at the same time, it's very, very universal in that way that Seinfeld is, and so much great Jewish humour, which I love. The loss of identity, the loss of self, feeling overwhelmed, feeling doubtful, it's all at play in this film. But what Ari Aster has done here, which is incredible, I really loved Midsummer. I wasn't so hot on Hereditary, but I really loved Midsummer. But what he's doing here is he is swinging even bigger. He is going for Lynch. He is going big time Lynch. There is all sorts of obscene, surreal, obscure things that are going on, and you either jump on board or you're not going to survive this ride. I can't really go into the closing acts because, as I say, I like to really stay away from spoilers, but it gets wild. The final hour ratchets it up. The tension is unreal, and I don't know how they managed to make me both terrified and hysterical at the same time. It's quite the masterclass. There's lots that doesn't quite hold up, but I absolutely can't wait to revisit this. But the finale is up there with some of the wildest stuff I've ever seen. It's so brave and ballsy, and it says so much. Also, apropos of nothing, I don't think I've ever seen a sex scene more deserving of its place in a film than in this one. Once you get to it, you'll see what I mean. But let's talk about the main person, Patti LuPone.
Well, I didn't know Ari before. I got a telephone call from my manager to set up a Zoom with Ari. And I went, I don't know who he is. And my kid said, "This is the man, Mom. This is the man." And then I wondered why he wanted to see me. Was he a musical theater queen? And so I asked the question. I said, "Ari, why me?" And he came, and his answer just blew my mind. He said he saw me in a David Mamet play called The Anarchist on Broadway, which lasted 2 weeks, by the way. He's friends with Clara Mamet. He knows David very well. So he came to see the play, and he said he talked about me for a week afterwards, how I handled the Mamet language. Well, I cut my teeth on David. I've worked with David since 1976. So I was thrilled that Ari came to me through that avenue. And I actually wrote to David afterwards that thanks for getting me the part. And I'm sure that the language was crucial. My comprehension or my delivery of language was crucial for Ari because of the monologue that I have in the movie.
So Patti LuPone plays Joaquin Phoenix's, Beau's mum, Mona. I can't imagine anything more apt and appropriate, considering that I was so anticipating Patti LuPone's appearance in this, to finally see what she would do, given all I'd learned about her, how big her performance would be. Well, in this 3-hour film, she doesn't turn up until right at the very end, and it's not a spoiler because the film is so surreal and outlandish and theatrical and dramatic in the most wonderful way that her appearance doesn't actually suggest or mean anything in the grand scheme of the plot, considering she dies in the opening scene. So the first time we do hear Patti LuPone, though, is on a phone call. Again, appropriately enough, just like in Frasier. It's when Beau rings to say he can't make it to the airport because of everything that's happened to him that morning. Even on the phone call, and all we see is Joaquin Phoenix's reaction to LuPone's voice. LuPone is so manipulative because she doesn't understand how Beau can be at home when he should be at the airport. She has a really serious tone in her voice. After at first going, "But why aren't you coming, Beau?" She pauses, and there's this really serious tone in her voice, which says so much. She just says, "I understand." It's a very dismissive kind of response. "I can come out to you next time so it's not such a pain." It's very overbearing. It feels manipulative, and you feel for Beau. There is, over the course of the film, a younger version of Beau's mum, Mona, in flashbacks or dream sequences that's presented to us. And at first I wasn't sure if it was Patti LuPone playing her, and it turns out that it wasn't. But you're getting this slight picture of what Beau's mum is like, getting built up by this other actress. We know that things aren't all well. It's never that well when the mother is sleeping in the same bed as the child who's almost a teenager. The first time we see LuPone's face is on the order of service for her funeral. And the second time we see her physical body, I suppose, it is missing the very head that was obliterated by the chandelier because she's in an open casket, sans head. Now, as I mentioned, and I have to be so careful here because for those of you who haven't seen it, I really don't want to spoil anything. But obviously you know that Patti LuPone is in this film. So it doesn't spoil anything to say that Patti LuPone finally makes her appearance towards the end of the film. And my goodness, what an incredible way to make her mark in my cinematic history in this film and as part of the Frasier on Film podcast, because LuPone puts on a powerhouse performance. She is terrifying, she's overpowering, and she's really domineering in the most incredible way. It's captivating. It felt to me Oscar worthy. Now, I know that Beau Is Afraid, I think it's scored quite well. I think it rates quite well, but I'm pretty sure the immediate reaction from audiences was quite sniffy about it. But my God, if for nothing else, LuPone's appearance is overwhelmingly scary. And the whole journey that you've been following comes to this point. And the final moments and the final scenes and that final section of the film is so loaded with guilty metaphors, Freudian symbolism that those who understand psychiatry and psychotherapy and psychoanalysis will immediately cotton into, is embodied in LuPone's performance. She doesn't go huge and big. This isn't Aunt Zora on screen. This isn't her doing her Broadway West End performances on screen, but it's her taking all of that energy, which she can so clearly do so well, and putting it into this archetypal Jewish mother. And I believe Ari Aster has said that it's the Jewish mother of all Jewish mothers, almost like a god unto herself. She embodies it in this persona and spits it out at Joaquin Phoenix's Beau, and it is stunning stuff. I think the performance is incredible, considering that Joaquin Phoenix has done 2.5 hours where he's ridden it himself. When LuPone comes on, she matches him, and you will remember her as much as you remember his performance. Quite stunning stuff. Really stunning stuff. Before I come on to LuPone's thoughts on the film, just a few bits of trivia in connection to it. The film was initially described by director and writer Ari Aster as a 4-hour-long nightmare comedy, and I believe Nathan Lane described it as a 3-hour-long anxiety attack, or panic attack. In the film, Joaquin Phoenix has his hand bandaged up, and he really goes through the walls. He gets hurt quite a lot. Phoenix, being the true professional that he was, he got sharpened pins installed in his bandaged hand to poke him if he ever used it, and he also put paper binding clips clamped to his stomach. The younger version of Joaquin Phoenix is played by an actor called Armin Nahapetian, and I remember at the time when the film came out, and indeed if you look at the poster you'll see he really looks like an AI version of Joaquin Phoenix. He's had to put on his Instagram account, "I am not AI," because so many people thought his face was de-aged and Joaquin Phoenix's face was put onto it. No, that's just the way he looks. And with its runtime of 3 hours, Beau Is Afraid is A24's lengthiest production. So what did LuPone think of Beau Is Afraid? Well, I'll play you a clip of her talking about it shortly, but she was apparently thrilled to play a character that was not a, in her words, wimpy mother. She described Mona as a super businesswoman and a mother with deep feelings that's not afraid to express them. She said it was a joy to develop the character and bring her to life, and she considers Mona her greatest screen role to date. Wow. I mean, that's really saying something. I'm delighted that I picked this film for this podcast, both for LuPone's performance and also because it's one of the most fantastic films I've seen in a long time. The ending scene in particular, LuPone has said, when you're given an opportunity to dig into a monologue like that, you're a fool not to take it. I'm so glad she did. Let's hear from LuPone for a second.
You know, working on it was just a joy. Working on it with both Ari and Joaquin. We were on night shoots. It was the three of us. And a wonderful thing happened. It was serendipity. I don't know Joaquin. I know his work, but I don't know the man. That's a very intense scene. And we were in the mornings when we all woke up after, shooting at night, I would have a French press with coffee, and I'd go out on our little balconies that were facing this lake, and we'd bond over coffee. I would be in my nightgown. Everybody was in their pajamas, and we would just talk to each other as people. And it really helped break any kind of barrier we might have had Joaquin and I might have had because we didn't know each other. So that when we got to that scene, it was easy because we saw each other as people. We saw each other as human beings. Most often in film, it's how do you doing, Patti? How do you doing, Joaquin? And then you go at it. And this gave us an opportunity to see each other as people.
And before we go ahead, disperse and make our crane connection of the week, I think we can go to the phone lines. Let's take line 4. Line 4, you're on the air.
Hello, Ben. It's Luke here. Just a short word on Beau Is Afraid. I was a fan of Asta's earlier work, but this is a much more intimate film. It's drenched with anxiety and plays out like an absurdist odyssey. Phoenix, of course, gives his usual committed performance and he conveys Beau's mental state immaculately. It's the tone here that's difficult to define for me. It shifts from moments of physical comedy to surreal horror. So things are kept interesting, but over the long runtime, this up and down takes its toll. The whole thing's a bizarre, thematically dense nightmare, and for some, I think the themes will have real relevance, but as such may prove too uncomfortable to enjoy.
Proof divisive, it certainly will. If what I've told you hasn't intrigued you, I would stay away. If it has, indulge yourself.
I just really feel the need to make a connection.
Well, Niles, I think you've made a connection. It just seems a little bit extreme, though, you know?
So let's close out today with our crane connection, as we are wont to do. This is the part of the show where we try to link everything back to the episode of Frasier we watched. Specifically, where we try to link Patti LuPone's Mona, the overbearing mother, to Patti LuPone's Pam, the caller on Frasier's show, who was so terrified of her in-laws. Well, after watching this film, it seems to me a no-brainer. Pam has now lived long enough that she's become the overbearing and overwhelming mother-in-law she's so strongly avoided in her younger years. She's gone from crawling across the carpet when the doorbell went to having her son twist like a worm on her hook. Mona's world is much bigger than Pam's. She would never crawl across the floor. She's afraid of no one. People fear her. And considering I didn't know who she was when I began this episode, I'm not sure I'd ever dare tell her that if I ever met her. Pam is dead. Long live Mona. And that brings us to the end. So, let's leave Niles and Frasier to finish their chewy steaks and mud pie at the timber mill. Let's leave Pam crawling across the living room floor. Let's leave Beau in his nightmarish, anxiety-ridden odyssey. And let's leave Patti LuPone to go out and do her thing because, god damn it seems nobody is doing what she does better. I'll definitely be watching out for anything else I see her in, but I suspect this first film of hers that I've ever seen will be impossible to beat. As always, thank you to you, dear listeners, for liking, subscribing, sharing, and all that good stuff. Don't forget, you can stay up to date with upcoming episodes by subscribing to the podcast. Please just search for Frasier on Film on all the usual podcast platforms to make sure you don't miss a single episode. You can connect with me online on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook using @FrasierOnFilm, and you can get in touch via email using FrasierOnFilm@gmail.com. Just like Beau, I'm sorry, thank you. I'm sorry to ask, thank you. But if you've liked what you've heard, please do share the podcast. Reviews are very important. I need to find that wide audience. Let's move on together. Let's build a movement. Thank you. Sorry. Next week's episode, we'll see Frasier challenged to a fist fight, which he'll almost certainly lose, in the episode I Hate Frasier Crane. Our guest actor for that episode will be Joe Mantegna, our favourite mob boss, Fat Tony from The Simpsons. And the film, which we'll be spotlighting, is 1991's Homicide. Good night.